In Lesson 24, we're going to start learning how to divide decimals by multiples of 10. The equation we're going to work with today is 54 divided by 90. Step 1 and Step 2 remain the same as if we were just dividing regular multi-digit decimals. So Step 1, we want to identify our whole in our divisor. Our whole is 54 and our divisor is 90. And then we want to set our context so we can start thinking about these numbers as something that is going on so that it helps us make sense of the problem. When we use this sentence frame, the first blank, if we have blank crackers, that's our whole, okay, because we're talking about how many crackers we're starting with. And blank students, that's kind of like how many parts are we going to have, or how many groups are we going to have. So that would be our divisor. And then our quotient would be the answer to this question. How much of a cracker will each person get? So altogether our context would be, if we have 54 crackers and 90 students, how much of a cracker will each person get? And you notice that I say how much of a cracker, because in looking at this problem, I can see that these 54 crackers, all 90 students aren't going to get one cracker, so I have to start thinking about my answer in like partial answers or fraction of an answer or a decimal of an answer. So we word our question, how much of a cracker? Step 3 is we want to decompose the divisor using 10 as one of our factors. So my divisor is 90, so I'm going to decompose this into two numbers, and one of those numbers has to be 10. So I'm going to fill my 10 in, and then I'm going to ask myself, what times 10 would equal 90, my divisor? And I noticed right away that 9 times 10. So I decomposed 90 into 10 and 9. And then step 4 is you want to rewrite the equation. So I would have 54 divided by 10 divided by 9. It's still the same equation as before, 54 divided by 90, but we've just kind of decomposed and rewritten. Here, step 5, I can get into solving my problem. And you can solve these problems in any way that works best for you. It can be using discs, you can use a place value chart, or you can visualize using movement of the decimal. I'm going to use moving of the decimal. I know that when I'm dividing by 10, or if I have to say I'm starting left to right, because that just works easiest for me. And I know when I'm dividing by 10 that I'm moving my decimal to the left by one place value, because I have 1 0. And so I'm left with 5.4 divided by 9. Now step 6 is we want to rename our decimal as needed. My decimal here, 5.4, my lowest place value is in the 10th position, so I'm going to rename my decimal as 54 tenths divided by 9. Now I know that my label for my answer is going to be in tenths because that is the only label that we have here, so I'm going to go ahead and record my label in tenths. And then I'm going to ask myself, I have 54 divided by 9, and I'm going to do that division, and I know that 54 divided by 9 is 6. So my answer is 6 tenths. So finally, step 7 is to write your answer in standard form. I like to draw my decimal and show my place values when I'm doing my answer in standard form, and tenths I know is one place value past the decimal, so I'm going to draw my line and then fill in my numbers. So 6 tenths would be equal to 0.6. So I can go back to my context and say, if we had 54 crackers and 90 students, each student would get 0.6 of a cracker, or 6 tenths of a cracker. All right, let's try one more problem. We have 5.4 divided by 90, or 5 4/10 divided by 90. And you notice here that we're getting into a decimal inside of our division problem. Step 1, we always want to identify our whole and our divisor. Our whole here is 5.4, and our divisor is 90. And then we need to set our context. Our context would be if we have 5.4 crackers and 90 students, how much of a cracker will each person get? And I might say to myself, wow, that's a lot of students and not a lot of crackers. So I know that each student isn't going to get very many crackers. So I can check my answer when I get there and make sure that it's a really small amount of a cracker. All right, let's move on to step 3, and we want to decompose our divisor with a multiple of 10, or excuse me, and 10 is a factor. So one of my decomposition numbers is going to be 10. And then I ask myself, what times 10 would equal 90? And it is 9. And I can look over here, and that was the same thing, so that was pretty easy. Then step 4 is we want to rewrite the equation. So we have 5 4/10 divided by 10 and divided by 9. Step 5 is we want to start solving. I like to solve from the left to the right. So I'm going to start with 5.4 divided by 10. And you can solve using discs, you can solve with your place value chart, or you can solve by visualizing the movement of the decimal. I'm going to do visualizing. I know I'm going to move my decimal one place value because I'm dividing by 10, and I'm going to move it to the left because I'm dividing. So 5.4 divided by 10 would be 0.54, or 54 hundredths. And then I bring down that 9 to continue my division problem. And now I like to rename my decimals just because it makes it easier to think about. The last place value, the lowest place value here, is in hundredths, so I'm going to rename my decimal in hundredths, and I have 54 hundredths divided by 9. I'm going to take a look at what my label is going to be. The only label I have here is hundredths, so I know that my answer is also going to be in hundredths, which I'm going to abbreviate with HD for 100, and then a THS, so that I know that it's hundredths. And then I take a look at my numbers, and I have 54 divided by 9. And I know that 54 divided by 9 is equal to 6. So I know that my answer is 6 hundredths. And then I want to write my answer in standard form. So I'm going to place my decimal. I know that hundredths goes 2 place values after the decimal. And then I fill in my answer of a 6. And my empties get filled in with a 0. So going back to my context, if we had 5.4 crackers and 90 students, each student would get 6 hundredths, or 0.06 of a cracker.